Hello, I'm Dustin Kirkland, a product manager at Google and your host at KubeCon Copenhagen. I'm joined here by one of my colleagues, Matt Rickard, who's a software engineer on Google's container tools team. Matt, tell us a little bit about Skaffold.
Sure. Skaffold is a developer workflow tool made kind of specifically for Kubernetes. It helps you get started with Kubernetes, it helps you develop your apps on Kubernetes, and it really targets that kind of inter-development workflow of build and deploy. And it also kind of utilizes some of the other tools that we published on our team, such as Canico, which is our on-cluster build system. So the idea is that you can use Skaffold to not only build and deploy, but with your cluster as your only kind of dependency.
Right. And Skaffold interfaces with other aspects of Google Kubernetes or Kubernetes in general?
Yeah, so the Kubernetes API is kind of like exactly what we're targeting. So with Skaffold, it's pluggable in the sense that you can build and deploy in a variety of ways, but your cluster is really the only thing that you need.
Okay. So a developer writing some code on their MacBook, walk us through, I just wrote some Ruby and I want to deploy that to GKE.
Sure. So you write your code, you write your Docker file, which is kind of your way to describe your container image. You write some Kubernetes manifest, which is how you're going to describe your resources on your Kubernetes cluster. And then you write the Skaffold YAML file, which actually just brings both of those together and gives you the full kind of metadata from source to deployment. So Skaffold takes that Skaffold YAML, it'll build your image, it'll deploy it, it'll actually introspect your image for all of your source code dependencies and perform a file watch on that. So when those files change, it kicks off that rapid development loop and you're able to kind of get that native experience, but on a cluster.
And then you're cooking with grease.
And you're cooking with grease.
All right, I understand you have a demo for us. You want to walk us through this demo?
Sure.
All right, let's see it.
Cool. So here I have, I'm just in the getting started portion of the Skaffold repository. You can check this out at Google Container Tools /Skaffold. And what I have here is, I have a very basic Go program here. It's just going to print hello world every second. I have a Docker file that describes it. So here I'm using a multi-stage Docker file. You could really use any sort of Docker file here that you want. And then I have a very simple Kubernetes resource definition here, which is just a pod that deploys this getting started container on my cluster. If we look a little bit at the Skaffold YAML, you can see kind of two main parts to it. The first being build, and we just have a list of artifacts here. The first being our Skaffold example. The really cool thing about Skaffold is that you can deploy multiple images and multiple deployments at the same time. So the idea behind that is that in this kind of microservice world, cloud native world, your services might be split up into many different microservices and you'll need to be developing on multiple of those at the same time. So Skaffold kind of supports all sorts of workflows like that. And then the deploy stanza here is basically just saying, take all of my Kubernetes manifest and deploy them. And I'll just go ahead and I'll do a Skaffold dev. So this is just going to do a build and deploy and then perform kind of a watch on the file system dependencies. So you can see that we're streaming our logs from our kind of deployed artifacts here. It's just saying hello world every second. I'll go in.
Now that deployed locally or that deployed to the cloud?
Yeah, so good question. So here I'm using a Minikube cluster, so it's local to my laptop, but Skaffold works both remotely and on local clusters. And there are some optimizations that we make for the local cases where we don't have to kind of push all of the artifacts around, but the experience is exactly the same. So now I'm just going to go and change some code here. I'm going to say hello KubeCon. And then I just saved it, and this will kick off the kind of build and deploy cycle again, and you can see that we've already redeployed our new pod, and it's printing out hello KubeCon. So you get that really kind of fast inner development loop for your workflow.
That was incredibly fast.
So of course, this is a minimal example, so we're only deploying a very small Go binary, but in practice, it is quite fast.
And have you heard from users using Skaffold for much larger, maybe real production type workloads?
Yeah, absolutely. And in that case, it's still great for that kind of inner development loop, but we also have a mode called Skaffold Run. And so Scaffold Run will just run this build and deploy pipeline once. So the idea is that you can call this from a product such as Google Container Builder or Jenkins or Spinnaker, and then you can kind of have the same kind of CI/CD workflow as you have locally. So that kind of bridges the gap, and users aren't left on this cliff of having all of these tools locally and then having to relearn something else in their CI/CD pipelines.
That's superb.